never considered Parliament as a real option. It's been raised before, and I've dismissed it actually quite quickly because my focus has always been about Oldham, and that's where the conflict came. Because this was the first time really where I did feel as though it was Oldham, it was a part of Oldham I felt connected to, and it was a parliamentary seat that hasn't come up for 45 years.
Right.
So it definitely was a kind of a period where I had to think very carefully about it, but it was a very difficult emotional decision to make because I'm absolutely connected to the council. You know, I've been the council leader for nearly 5 years. I've been a councillor for 12 years, and I feel connected. It feels like they're my extended family in a lot of respects. You develop very close relationships. My considerations were, how can I best serve the town that I live in? Because I stood into politics to try and make a difference, to try and make things better. And I think incrementally you realise that you have to wear a different hat to achieve more for the town and to achieve the things that you want. But position has never been the end for me. It's always been a means to an end. And I suppose I feel to get the economy right in Oldham, to get the housing that we want, to get the schools right and the education system right, to get the skills right so our population can get decent, well-paid jobs right across Greater Manchester, I reflected that the best way I could do that would be to step up and be an ambassador at a national level.
Obviously, with devolution coming to Greater Manchester and as a council leader of one of the boroughs involved in that, a lot of people would say that you'd actually have more power and be more capable of doing that with devolution coming rather than being an MP for the opposition. What are your thoughts on that?
I think devolution, as it's currently framed, is devolution very much in George Osborne's image. That isn't devolution as the Labour Party would want, or as I would want. You know, the very fact that we have to go cap in hand to George Osborne to beg for power, and actually if you look at the power that's being devolved, it's generally other people's power. George Osborne hasn't given away any of his own taxation raising powers, independence of spending powers. It's all about government work programme activity. Look at the Housing Investment Fund as a good example. So much was made of the fact that Greater Manchester now has £30 million a year to spend on housing. It's a drop in the ocean. We had over £100 million just for Oldham and Rochdale as part of the housing market renewal programme that they scrapped. But even if you take the £30 million, George Osborne still takes £76 million a year from Greater Manchester in stamp duty income. So he takes more still than he's giving back for housing development. And that's not independence, it's not devolution as far as I can see. It's George Osborne trying to pull the strings still. And, you know, for me, whoever's in government does make a real difference. They set the economic policy, they set our how we sit in the world, and that's really important, particularly for manufacturing and engineering jobs. You know, and I want to see Oldham thrive again. You know, it wasn't that long ago that the mills were operational, the engineering works were operational. You know, we were kind of king of industry and manufacture. And people now live in a very uncertain time. They don't know what the future is going to be. And I think devolution will help some of that because there's no doubt that we can better organise ourselves locally. But actually who's in government makes a massive difference. So, you know, making sure that we have people playing the game properly at Greater Manchester is important. You know, but Oldham Council is more than just me. You know, you've got a team of people there that work really hard for the borough they care about as much as I do. And those people will continue to make sure that Oldham gets its fair share at Greater Manchester. But with me working in partnership at a national level, making sure that I bang the drum and that I get resources into Oldham. And that's what I'm there to do.
Right. Well, you mentioned that you think that Parliament's the best place for you to take that fight. In terms of your ambition, how far does that go? Can you see yourself on the front bench as Labour Party leader? Is that what's the extent of that ambition? Do you see yourself going?
My sole focus is on the 3rd of December.
Right.
There's a lot of people taking for granted that Labour's going to win that seat and we're going to do very well, and then saying, so what does then that mean for the next steps and all the other things? I'm solely focused on the 3rd of December because my concern is for the well-wishers and people who are supporting, it's great, and you know the feedback on the doorstep is very positive. But there is a lot of people who are taking for granted the fact that we're going to win, and we cannot take this election for granted. You know, it's going to be a cold December day. People might be more inclined to stay at home in the warmth than to go out and vote, but it's really important if people want to see a Labour MP retained and see me as their Labour MP. That's only going to happen if people come out and put a cross on a ballot paper. It won't happen by accident. So the focus is on that. And the broader point, because I don't want to kind of skip the point that you made, what are my ambitions? My ambition is to make Oldham a really decent place. Everything else is just a means to that end. So I'm going to continue to do what I do to make sure that I get more resources to Oldham, and whatever opportunities come up in the future, if that delivers that end that I'm trying to get to for Oldham, then I'll consider it.
Right, okay. You're obviously a really busy guy. How tough has it been to balance your by-election campaign alongside your responsibilities as council leader?
Well, if you think about my different responsibilities, so apart from being a dad, which is my first and foremost responsibility, and a partner, I'm also a ward councillor. So there are people in Fails the Feast that still need support from their local councillor. I've been a council leader, but also with the Regeneration, Inward Investment and Greater Manchester portfolio. I sit on the combined authority where I take responsibility for the transport authority. That's bigger than most councils, but I do that in my spare time. I then represent Labour councillors on the Local Government Association and Labour councillors on the National Executive of the Labour Party. And then I'm involved in other kind of wider community activity as well. So I've always been non-stop and absolutely busy, and this is just a continuation of me being very, very busy. But clearly, it's actually a very short election campaign. My deputy in Oldham Council has stepped up to deal with quite a lot of the day-to-day stuff that comes on, and I'm keeping in contact and making sure that the big issues and the big regeneration schemes are kept on track. So yeah, at the moment the balance is fine, but the campaign is full on, because of course what we don't want to do on the 4th of December is not to get the result that I want and to say if only we did this or this or this. We're working flat out to make sure that we have a good night on the 3rd of December.
You mentioned your role within the local government association. Is that we know, I've heard you speak in council meetings about it all the time, how passionate you are about local government. If you are elected to Parliament, is that something you're going to miss?
Well, no, when we talk about devolution, I tend to think that the Commons is very good at talking about reforming or reorganising other institutions. So it spends quite a lot of time talking about the European Union and how that should be organised. It spends quite a lot of time talking about councils and how they should be reorganised. It talks about the Lords and how that should be reorganised. Actually spends almost no time talking about itself and how it can modernise and be relevant in the future. And I do think if devolution is going to work, and I passionately believe in devolution, empowering people, sending power down to communities. You can't have a system where Parliament still has that very centralist grabbing power mentality about it. And actually I do think it's in the benefit of local councils and devolution to have a champion and an ambassador in Parliament making that case.
I spoke to Nigel Farage a couple of weeks ago. I asked him if you were the last person he wanted to win that selection meeting. His answer was that actually Jeremy Corbyn, well, you were the last person Jeremy Corbyn wanted to win that selection meeting. What are your thoughts on those comments?
I can't see that being true. If you think about my role at the moment, I'm on the NEC where I work with Jeremy Corbyn. I've got a responsibility on the LGA to make sure I have good relationships with across the front bench, and of course Jeremy is critical to that. But actually on quite a lot of issues where people would try and find division, me and Jeremy are completely as one. On austerity, he's been very clear that the cuts have gone too far, and as a council leader I've seen firsthand the cuts absolutely have gone too far, and they've gone right to the bone now, and people are being affected by that. The need to make sure that those with the broader shoulders take more of the kind of taxation I'm absolutely in agreement with. It can't be right that today people are having their working family tax credits cut at the same time that millionaires are getting tax breaks. So there's quite a lot of things where, kind of on a matter of principle, I absolutely agree with Jeremy Corbyn, and those for me are the big issues. What's our role, as a government in making sure that we are a fair society? So no, I actually don't see the divisions. I would be, countering it very, very strongly, which is actually what Nigel Farage really meant was I was the last candidate he wanted, because he knows it picked a very poor candidate in John Bickley. He's part of the UKIP parachute regiment where he gets drafted into every by-election going, it seems, and I'm pretty clear that people in Oldham just have no time for that. Kind of whatever the national politics, whatever the arguments that go on during the by-election campaign, people in Oldham are not stupid. They recognise that whoever is here on the 4th of December, the morning after the night before, is going to be the person that represents them. And what I'm saying is, look, if you want somebody that's just very loud, then maybe John Bickley is the person for you. If you want somebody that's got a strong voice, who's going to do the work, that's going to represent you because actually I've got a stake in the town, then I'm the person to vote for.
Let's stay with John Bickley for a minute then. He made some interesting comments about the plans to transform, ongoing development of the transformation of the old town hall into a cinema. He said that those plans should be scrapped if it's not too late. Do you think he genuinely means that and he's got a genuine concern, or was that just an attack at you?
I don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about John Bickley, to be honest, because I think on the 4th of December the chances are he'll be looking for another by-election somewhere else, so I don't spend a lot of time thinking about him, and I hope people in Oldham don't either, but I don't underestimate that he is a significant challenge in the election. So the comments that he makes, we do have to take seriously whether we would want to or not, and I think people in Oldham need to think about whether John Bickley, given that's his view, really represents the people of Oldham. I remember standing in the Egyptian room at the old town hall where 500 people in Oldham came to take part in the consultation, and something like 98% of those people said they wanted the cinema to go ahead. So I'm very happy to speak for the 98% if John Bickley's happy to speak for the 2%.
Let's stay with regeneration then. It's something you've been very vocal about and passionate about. Are you worried what will happen to that if you do become a member of Parliament? What happens to regeneration in Oldham if you do take up the seat?
I'm very clear that regeneration isn't job done. I think we're laying the foundations, but it's a long way to go. And this is a 10-year or more programme of activity. Things like the old town hall, the M&S store that's being built in particular, are really important to that, and those will be delivered. The construction contract is going well on the old town hall, and that'll be open next year. Families will be there enjoying the cinema and the restaurants and the new public square that's being built. And of course, Marks and Spencer has been signed, but we've got a long way to go to get that built. So my promise to Oldham is I'm going to continue to be involved in that for as long as people want me to be involved in it. Whether that's as some kind of regeneration ambassador, where I'm kind of involved with kind of flying the flag on behalf of the town to investors and developers and pension funds and people like that. I'm very clear that this wasn't a day job for me. This is a passion to make Oldham better. That passion doesn't go away just because I'm representing Oldham in a different hat. So absolutely on that front, people can be assured that I am absolutely committed to making sure we see this through. Right,
so a role of maybe, like you said, regeneration ambassador is a possibility if you do become an MP on the 3rd of December then?
Absolutely. I mean the frame of that will have to be in agreement in some respects, but the principle of I want to be involved. I think I've still got something to offer. I think we're at a very interesting time, and it excites me. The prospect of Oldham being a better place. That I want to spend time on it.
You mentioned that you've been working closely with Jean while you've been doing your by-election campaign. Will it be Jean then that takes over if you are elected as council leader? Will Jean be the next council leader if you are successful?
I need to be a bit careful. I don't talk myself out of a job too early, because who knows how the 3rd of December might go. Listen, the process is a democratic process with the Labour group. People will be invited to put forward if there is a vacancy, and Labour group members will have a vote on who that person should be.
Does being the only by-election candidate that actually lives in Oldham put you at an advantage to the others, do you think?
I think it can work both ways. I think, first of all, you're a known quantity, so people know what they're getting. There'll be some people who have a view that that's a negative thing. There'll be some people who have a view that's a positive thing. My view is, as a candidate for the Labour Party, that puts me in a very strong position because, almost without exception, when I'm going around the constituency campaigning, I've walked every street before. I've spoken to people before. The people I'm talking to are the people I see in the supermarket, the people I see in the libraries. They're part of the community that I belong to. So my view is it's more positive than anything else. But it's also a great pressure, isn't it? If you live in the borough, you've got a stake in the borough. Who wins this election is more important than the individual. It's actually about the future of our town. So there's quite a lot of pressure on me as an individual to make sure that I work hard, that I don't let people down, and that I fight a good election.
What's the response been then, early doors? What's on the doorsteps? What's the response been from people you've been talking to?
By and large, it's been very, very positive. I think when we talk about the old town hall, and where UKIP stood on that, I wouldn't underestimate how angry people were that somebody from outside of town tried to come into Oldham and tell us we didn't deserve a bloody cinema. You know, people are fairly straightforward in Oldham, and people were robust in their view about where UKIP stood on that. But kind of more broadly, really, you know, the very early attack on kind of whether Labour was patriotic or whatever. People know my track record in fighting for investment in Cenotaphs. People in the community know that I was a Remembrance Sunday organiser. You know, people who are close to me know my dad was in the TA and my granddad and my great-granddad were in the army. You know, there's a bit where actually quite a lot of this is about the campaign on the door. Some of this is about the resilience that you have in the campaign, just because people know actually they can see through some of the spin that other parties send out.
We're expecting tax credits to play a very big role in this by-election. Is that something that you've already started to get feedback on the doorstep? Just how big an issue has this been to the people you've been speaking to?
People we speak to say the government have gone too far. I think people reflect that the government have gone quite a long way to change welfare and benefits overall, and they've done that with a degree of public support. If you look at the British Attitude Survey, people do believe when they're asked that benefits are too generous and it should be reformed. So the government have done that with an element of consent. But the working family tax credits were not in the manifesto, and actually it cuts right across what public opinion is, because the public believe, quite rightly, that if you're willing to work hard, you should be able to get on in life, and tax credits were a way of helping people get on in life. So it cuts right across the claim that the Tories are there for working people. It cuts right across what good people believe to be decent, which is work hard and hard work to pay off. I don't think people have gone. People think the government have gone too far, and there's a real anger and frustration on the door with people that we talk to, where they feel as though they've had the kind of the wool pulled over their eyes. Really, people feel conned.
Sticking with government cuts then, by 2017, Oldham Council have had its budget cut by £205 million. How difficult has that been as council leader to manage?
It's been horrendous. I mean, there was definitely efficiency to be made in the first year or two, but government clearly think that there are more efficiencies to go at, and it's just completely untrue. I mean, if you look at the state of where we are now as a town, just look at the libraries that have closed, look at the community centres that have closed, look at the number of police stations that have closed, look at the fact that the two, the Magistrates Court and the County Court are going to close, look at the recent consultation from Department for Work and Pensions and HMRC and what office accommodation might close in the town centre. These are real jobs. The people who work for the council were Oldham people. The people that work in the job centre, that work in the courts, are Oldham people. So these are not cuts without consequences. These are people who were working hard, providing for themselves and the family, who now don't have a job to go into. So there are times when, with the redundancies in the council, it keeps you awake at night. You feel a sense of grief for people who you've built up a relationship with, who, through no fault of their own, have found themselves out of work. What we tried to do, though, is to be good custodians and make sure that even within the cuts, that we continue to invest in growth, job creation in particular. We don't just focus on the cuts, we focus on what's left, because there's still money left, and we need to make sure that we use that to the best effect. But people need to be clear, the way the Tories have gone about this is not about saving money. If you look across Greater Manchester, for every pound that's been cut from local council, £1.10 has been spent on health services and Department for Work and Pensions. So overall, the government haven't saved money at all. They've shifted money from the front line to basically an emergency response, because the system is not far away from falling over. And I think what I can bring is that experience, and I can make that case in Parliament.
Have those cuts affected regeneration plans at all? Have they put them at threat? We've
been very clear from the outset that we weren't going to wait for government to come to Oldham and sort our problems out. We were going to do it ourselves. So thankfully, our regeneration plans are not predicated on government funding. But listen, just look at where the government have been involved and look at what they've done. So, the skills capital funding means that colleges now are in buildings that just aren't fit for purpose, where their funding is significantly under threat. So there are young people going into schools and colleges in buildings that just aren't fit for purpose. Look at housing market renewal. You've got swathes and swathes of land where terraced housing was being demolished, and the money that was in place to rebuild and provide new housing for people to live in was snatched away by government. So actually, where there have been consequences to the government trying to save money, and those have been on the things that people do value, education, skills, housing. But what we try to do, despite that, is to maintain positivity, give confidence to investors, and we continue to do what we can do. But that's part of the reason why I'm standing in this election, of course, because I recognise that as a council there's only so much that we can do ourselves. Actually, who's in government does matter, and that's why I think it's important that you have a strong voice representing Oldham down there.
Michael Meacher represented Oldham for 45 years. He won the last election in May with a majority of over 14,000 votes. Yeah. I think it's quite clear that this is more than just a parliamentary seat to Labour, isn't it? It will be a disaster for Labour if you don't win, won't it?
Well, it's worth bearing in mind that Michael's arrival in Oldham actually was 2 years before he became MP. He actually stood in a by-election and lost. So I'm hoping not entirely to repeat Michael's history in that sense, but I am hoping that I carry his torch of, really excellent public services, fighting for people of Oldham. It is an important election, there's no doubt about it. Listen, we need to make sure that people turn out on the day, we need to make sure that people vote, and we need to make sure that we don't take this for granted and the public don't take it for granted either. I'm hopeful that Labour will maintain its position. I'm hoping that I'm a candidate that can, instill trust in people to come out and vote. But if all people do is to stay at home and say Labour's going to win anyway, then there's a good chance that Labour won't get over the line, and if we do get over the line, it could be very close.
Does the media circus surrounding Jeremy Corbyn and questions mainly from other parties of his leadership, does that just put more pressure on you as a Labour candidate?
It depends what your starting point was. For me, this was always going to be a local campaign. It's about Oldham, which is why I think UKIP have just chosen the wrong candidate. Had they chosen somebody from the local area, they could have got me on my home turf, if you like, and been able to attack on that basis. Listen, I've seen UKIP in a very short campaign be all over the place on what their attack is. They started from the comfort zone of immigration and borders and Europe. They then shift to Jeremy and whether there are divisions or differences. They then go to who's more British and patriotic. They then go to who needs a cinema in Oldham. Then back full circle to let's talk about the borders in Europe. They're all over the place on the campaign, and I think they're just kind of clutching at straws, really. If they want to attack me as an individual, there's nothing I can do about that. That's not the way that I fight campaigns. If they want to attack Jeremy as an individual, I think people, generally speaking, have very little patience for that, because I think what people want is actually take away the petty stuff and let's talk about the issues that really matter to people in Oldham. And those are issues like family tax credits. They are issues about people not being able to earn enough to live, people not being able to secure decent, well-paid, long-term employment. Those are issues people want to talk about, and at the moment they're not the issues that UKIP are talking about. So UKIP have got a real issue, which is that they're talking to their hardcore supporters on issues they're comfortable with. They're not venturing further than that to talk to the wider public about what matters to them.
Just lastly then, Jim, can you tell me why people of Oldham West and Royton should vote for you?
On the 3rd of December, people are going to have a choice. On the 4th of December, they're going to have an MP. If they want their MP to be somebody who's local, of the community, who has a long-term stake in the community and will work hard to make it a better place, I'm the only candidate on the ballot paper that can do that. If they want somebody with a track record, somebody that has delivered for the town, somebody that has fought for investment, for jobs, for new housing, has fought for regeneration across the town that people can see, I'm the only candidate on the ballot paper that has that credibility and has that experience. But I think more importantly, for me, whatever happens on the 4th of December, I'm going to be here, either as an MP or as an Oldham resident, fighting to make this town better.